Hello, everybody. I'm John Albin Wilkins. I'm known as John Albin on Drupal.org and Twitter and anywhere else. Those of you who don't know who I am, I'm the maintainer of the Zen theme for Drupal, which is about to have a 5.0 or 7.x 5.0 release later this week. And I also do various other modules that are related to front end, like a menu block module, which has configurable menu blocks, and I'm also a core contributor to Drupal as well. So today I wanted to talk about responsive building techniques. Now, how many people here are completely new to responsive design? You know what it is, but you don't know how to build it. A fair amount of you. Okay. So how many people have tried doing some responsive building? Okay. So I'm not going to go into a lot of the technical details for learning responsive design, but to give you sort of intermediate tips on stuff. This will be really useful for you when you actually start building responsive designs. But I'm not going to go into the mechanics of using media queries, and actually, Ethan Marcotte has a great article on a list apart where he talks about this sort of simple building blocks that you need for responsive design, which are pretty basic, which is just basically a fluid grid so that it expands with the size of your viewport. So no matter what size screen you have, whether it's large or small, the grid sort of fits into that. And then he also combines that with what are called CSS3 media queries. CSS3 media queries allow you to basically wrap several CSS rules inside a media query and say, only apply these rules if these conditions match. And the conditions that you're matching are the size of your viewport. So you say, use just a one-column layout by default. That's for all your mobile devices. And then you add a media query and say, hey, if it's above 520 pixels to say 800 pixels, use this two-column layout. So it sort of fits your tablets and sort of larger phones like the Galaxy Note, which is huge. It's a huge phone. And then you have another media query where you say, use this for sort of desktop sizes. And that's it. Responsive design actually has very few requirements. So go to a list apart, find Ethan Marcotte's article on responsive design, and you'll sort of find those sort of beginning steps. And then I'm going to be talking about some tricks or tips and tricks that'll help you specifically with building Drupal sites when you start doing responsive stuff. So when you start talking about responsive design in Drupal, the really obvious way to do this is with regions, right? So you have your sort of traditional Drupal site, main content, left sidebar, right sidebar, header, footer. And Luke Wroblewski actually wrote an article recently about some patterns he saw in responsive designs. And here's your traditional desktop layout, right? Left sidebar, right sidebar. And then for sort of smaller viewports, they'll move the right sidebar down below so that you get your main content sort of still there. And then for even smaller, like mobile devices, then it becomes sort of a linear progression where your content is first, and then your sidebars appear linearly after that. This is a really common pattern.
Is this okay, everyone? Yeah. It's a lot better for the video. Thanks.
Now, and I should say actually that for Drupal 8, this is what Stark is going to be doing. How many people here are familiar with the Stark theme? Have you ever sort of popped it open and sort of look at it? All it is it's Drupal's default markup, and it has one file in it, which is the layout to arrange the left and right sidebars. That's all it does. It's mainly just to be sort of an example to show you what kind of styles in markup Drupal comes with, basically without a theme. So Stark is the unthemed theme that comes with Drupal core. So we use this exact pattern to make Stark responsive in Drupal 8. Now, there are a couple problems with this. It's kind of boring. The fact that Luke was able to go out and find a whole bunch of sites that follow this pattern means that your sort of responsiveness is going to be just like a lot of other sites' responsiveness. And the other problem, the second thing is actually it's kind of dangerous. And the reason for that is because of content. The most important thing on your site is your content, right? So as you add stuff, as you build out your site, you have your content there and you're like, okay, now I need to make this a responsive site. So how do I make it responsive? I know I'll add in some sidebars with some extra blocks in order for me to make it responsive. This is kind of antithetical to the entire notion of building a mobile-first responsive site because you want it to be sort of as lean as possible, sort of focused on your content because that's what your user is focused in. They don't need a lot of extra gee whiz sidebar blocks. So building a responsive design that requires extra blocks just to make it responsive is kind of silly. You know, you're filling out the page with all of this junk and then saying, hey, look, I'm responsive. It's not such a great idea. So mobile first. Who's heard of this technique or this concept, mobile first? Okay. So Luke Wroblewski, who gave the keynote presentation at DrupalCon Denver, he talks about this a lot. And basically the idea behind it is both a technical issue and a sort of user experience issue. Because from a technical standpoint, I'll do that first because it's sort of the least convincing argument, is that there are a lot of devices out there and they don't know anything about media queries. They don't support media queries. So if you start building responsive designs, those media queries don't work, which means all the layouts that are inside media queries don't work at all. But it turns out that this is okay as long as you build your site to be mobile first, meaning that if you assume that none of your media queries are going to work and just look at the CSS that's outside of media queries, that should be what you're focused on for mobile sites or for mobile devices, right? So anything outside the media queries, that's your mobile layout. That's your mobile site. So from a technical standpoint, that means you're sort of progressively enhancing for larger viewpoints, adding in sort of media query support for those larger sites. This works quite well. The other aspect of mobile first is this sort of mobile first idea starts to become sort of content first and also users first. Because the most important thing when you open up your site on a mobile phone, I should actually hold my phone up rather than my keynote slider here. But the most important thing is the content. That's why they came to your site. You know, they don't want to see your sidebar. They don't want to see all the blocks. They want to see your content. So it really should be the first thing that they see when you open up your site. And of course, that's the same thing as taking your users first, assuming that what they need is the most important thing. I could give a presentation just on mobile first, but fortunately, Luke does a better job than I do. Like I said, he called it the hangover slot because it was 9 a.m. on Thursday, which was after 2 nights of drinking at DrupalCon. So if you go to this site, denver2012.drupal.org, and go into the keynote section, you'll find a video for that keynote, and it's a great keynote. It's filled with facts. If you're not quite convinced on the mobile first strategy, listen to him. He does a way better job of explaining it than anybody else on the planet. And it's really funny too, which is even better. So I highly recommend that. So again, mobile first, content first, users first. When we start thinking about content first, and when we start thinking about Drupal, we realize that we have an opportunity with Drupal 7 because of this sort of content first nature of mobile first, user first, content first. Drupal 7 has fields, right? A lot of your content is structured. A lot of other CMSs will just have a single sort of giant body area where you fill in all of the crap that you want on your page using a WYSIWYG and layouts or whatever else you put inside this block, right? And Drupal 7 has structured content. So you're able to, add images, add in sort of a structure to your content types. And because of that, you can start focusing on those individual fields to become the responsive pieces of your design, rather than just the entire content being one thing that you can only sort of move around like this in your responsive design. Suddenly, with individual fields, now you can tackle those individual pieces and move them around in your responsive layouts. And this is a great, great thing about Drupal, which just turned out to be awesome for responsive design. Right. So yeah, I should have shown you this. So here's a couple of fields from our article type: title, tags, body, images. Each of those pieces can then become responsive elements in your layout. And basically, this is a field-based responsive, which means that your entire content is responsive, rather than sort of the layout being responsive. It's the actual content that becomes responsive. Let me give you an example of this. So Palantir.net, this is the company that I work for. They're Chicago-based, and we just redid our site to be responsive last year. We used the Zen theme and just sort of all of the responsive web design techniques that you can learn, and we built out the site using this sort of field-based thing. And here's a particular page. You can see that on the side here we have like these highlights of, this is a case study, so highlights of this particular website, the team members that built it, a big image, sort of the body content here, related articles, similar projects, the date of it. And then here we can see that I'm changing the screen size here so it's smaller. Now the site has become so that all of those elements got moved down below, and you can see as you go even smaller, the elements become more and more inline. At the end here, we now have just 2 columns that take some of this stuff that was on the left side, and then our mobile layout becomes very linear here. I don't know if you guys want to see that video. It went a little fast. But with it, this is a great thing about Drupal 7 and being able to focus on just those particular elements and move them around in the grid. Because you wouldn't be able to do this if you tried to put all of this content inside one WYSIWYG container. So now I'm going to talk about how I can actually start doing this stuff. One of the first things that we're going to have to start with, of course, is with fields. And when Drupal 7 was designed, we built a field wrapper, a field TPL file. It was designed by the engineers who don't know a whole lot about front end. They're just like, we need some divs here, we need some classes, because I think that themers like that stuff. And they basically assumed the worst possible case, which is a multi-value field that's plain text and requires a label, right? Now, most fields that you have on a site don't have any labels because you don't need to say on the website that this is the body of the page. So let's look at it. So here, you can see we have a wrapper around the label, which most people times we don't need. Then we have a wrapper around each individual field value, and then a wrapper around all of those values, and then a wrapper around everything here. So if you don't have a label, this collapses, but then you still are ending up with 3 levels of divs just for a multi-value field. And if you don't have multi-value fields, if you just have one value, it's still giving you 3 wrappers. This is kind of painful. I'm sure we'll be able to clean this up for Drupal 8, but that didn't help you a whole lot when you're building sites right now with Drupal 7. Fortunately, I got together with a bunch of people at Palantir and said, this is crazy, let's fix this now. And we came up with the fences module, which is available at drupal.org/project/fences. And basically what it does is it allows you to configure each of your fields and specify exactly what HTML5 element you want to use to wrap it. And it doesn't give you 3 wrappers, it's just going to give you 1 wrapper. So let's look at what fences assume. It sort of assumes the norm, which is there's already markup in your field content itself, so you may not want a wrapper at all. That's one of the options, no wrapper at all. This, of course, is great for body fields because oftentimes you don't need to style body specifically, you don't need any wrappers, it's got paragraphs and stuff all in it already. Don't need a wrapper. And it goes inside the node TPL anyway, which is a giant wrapper. So let's look at sort of the basic pattern of the template files that are provided by fences. So there's an H3 with a field label and the actual label. And of course, if you don't have a label, it goes away and then just leaves the element that you picked and then the values inside here. Right? Now, I said that you get to pick which element. I'll come back to this in a little bit, but let's go through and actually show you what I mean by picking the actual HTML5 element for you want for a field. So here we're managing our fields. We're going to click on one of these things and edit a particular field by clicking on the edit link. Scroll down a little bit past sort of the default values and stuff over here, and now there's a new item here in the field settings where you pick the actual, choose the HTML to use to wrap this field. It defaults to div because we don't want to break sites right when you install fences. I wish we could have it default to something else, but we can't do that yet. And here's some of the options that you give. And this, I basically went through the entire HTML5 spec and say, what elements could you possibly use, no matter how crazy it sounds, to wrap your field? Because I don't actually know how crazy you're going to get. And I'm not going to make any assumptions. I don't judge, I just provide you with the options. Somebody suggested that maybe I should put the sort of most commonly ones at the very top. I think that's a very sensible thing, and I'll probably patch fences to do that, to have common options at the top rather than forcing you to look through this giant alphabetically organized and sort of grouped together, but still very long list. So here we have, block level elements. These are divs, paragraphs, pre-formatted text, some phrasing elements, which is bolds, M's, strike-throughs, spans. We even have Ruby. I don't know if anybody here knows what Ruby text is. No Japanese or Chinese speakers in here. Yeah, but as part of the HTML5 spec, maybe you do need some Ruby text. It's an option. And of course, in sections, address, article, asides, all of your headings, header groups, that's there. You can pick exactly the element that you want for the field. And the nice thing about this is that because it's specified at the sort of field settings, when you edit the field itself, that information is used every time you use a field, no matter where in Drupal and no matter what contrib module grabs the fields, this is available. For example, if you build views, as long as you tell views to use Drupal's field TPL, fences will come in and will give you the right wrapper. So that's great. When in doubt, go naked. So if you're not sure exactly what kind of wrapper you need, pick the no wrapper option, right? It works. You can't necessarily target this with any CSS because there's no wrapper, there's no wrapping classes. But if you're not actually going to need those sort of wrapping classes, don't use them. Just leave them out of your markup. Leaner markup, of course, helps with front-end performance. Smaller page sizes, much better for mobile devices. So, oh yeah, fences everywhere automatically. So view modes. How many people here have used view modes when you're configuring your content types? They're a slightly advanced feature, but they're right there in Drupal core. So basically when you're configuring a node type, there's the teaser mode versus the full mode. There are other modules that allow you to arbitrarily create new view modes. So you can have like a teaser view on the slideshow page or whatever. You create as many view modes as you want. Because fences is specific to the field and not specific to the view mode, it's the same wrapper no matter what view mode. There are other solutions that try to do something similar to fences out there, and a lot of times they are specific to view modes, which means you need to reconfigure the field options every single time. We didn't really like that solution, and we wrote our own. So basically, the rule is as long as whatever module is using the field TPL, fences will come in and use it. And the way that it works is actually with theme hook suggestions. Theme hook suggestions is another thing that I love about Drupal 7. It's a sort of intermediate skill level for Drupal theming. But how many people have heard of theme hook suggestions? Okay. How many people have heard of what were called template suggestions in Drupal 6? A little bit more people. So that's when you have like the, I'll talk about Drupal 7. So the node -- article.tpl.php. This is a node TPL that's specific to article content types. So if you wanted to have, rearrange the variables that are inside the node TPL, you can do it specifically just for the article content type by using this node -- article. Fences is basically the same way. It adds in these suggestions that says, hey, I know that this field has been configured to use a list, so I'm going to provide this suggestion that is basically field -- fences UL. And that's how it works sort of in the background, if you're curious. So what that means is that you can also override the field TPL suggestions that fences gives you by just sort of going into the fences module, grabbing that TPL file, moving it to your theme, tweaking it to be what you want. And then, of course, if you are doing theme hook suggestions in your theme, fences completely respects that and will let the theme override anything that the module specifies. So I have no idea why I put that picture in there. Anyway, it's basically smart custom markup that you get to define. So this is fantastic for handling the kind of crazy field markup that Drupal provides for you. One of the other things that I really like is field collections in fences. How many people have heard of the field collections module? This is basically a module that allows you to create fieldable fields, which basically it's nested fields. So you can have a single field that is literally a collection of other fields. So it has 2 or 3 fields in there. And then if you have, basically, if you make that like a multi-value field, then it's that collection multiple times. So you could like create like an address field collection if you wanted to, that it gives you, just street address, city, state, add all of those individual fields to the collection and then make that multi-value. And it's really quite powerful way to build these sort of complex fields. I really quite like it, and Fences works great with it. So here's a, let me go back. Too much. Okay. So this is a field that I created, and it is a field collection field. So basically down, I don't remember where you create that, but anyway, so I've created a field collection, and I'm going to go in there and, oh yeah, here it is. So field collections, you basically create a field collection, and then, you create a field collection from the structure page, add the fields that you want to that collection, and then you can add that collection to your node types. That's how the sort of workflow goes for that. Field collections here, and I just added a new fields collection that I'm creating, adding in my fields. So I've created inside this collection, this figure caption, I've added in an image field, and then a caption field, which is just long text. If people are familiar with the HTML5 figure element, and basically it's a way for you to, it's markup that allows you to semantically define, this is my image and this is the caption of the image. But I didn't quite explain that quite right, because that's sort of the basic use case for it. But you can put any type of figure there at all. It doesn't have to be an image. It could be like a code snippet. So like, you're reading a book and you have a code snippet, it's got a little caption in there that says what this code snippet's about. That's what figure can be used for. So you can have like a code snippet at the top here, and then a caption about that. And that's what the figure element does in HTML5. And that's what I'm sort of recreating here with the field collection. And then, yep, there. So it becomes one of the add existing fields. You basically will see figure there listed once you go. So, and of course, Fences works with that. So when you're adding those individual fields to the collection, you get to pick what kind of wrapper you want. For that image one, I actually used no wrapper at all. And for the caption, I used the fig caption HTML5 element, because that's what you're supposed to use inside the figure one. And then, of course, for the actual collection, I specified figure as the element. So that's fields. Let's start looking at layout markup. One of the things that we tried out with Palantir.net, we actually tried like 2 or 3 different building techniques just to see what worked. One of the ways that we did responsive content was actually to tweak our node TPLs and like move the fields all the different places and see what happens with that. And that was actually kind of hard to do. And another way that we tried to do it was with custom CTools layouts. If you have views installed on your site, and I would be shocked if you don't, you have to have CTools installed on it and Page Manager and all that stuff. Let me go back here. So panels, if you've ever used panels, there's a way you can pick the layout that you want to use for that panel. And with the CTools layouts is a way for you to define the layouts that you want for a panel. But because they're CTools layouts, that means that other modules can sort of come in and use them besides just panels. So like the display suite module also can use these exact same layouts. And when I say create a custom layout for panels and display suite, what I'm talking about is literally creating a TPL file that specifies sort of some regions in there. And the reason why this is nice for responsive layouts is because they're reusable, right? If I went and did it this other way that I was talking about, which is modify my node TPL and move stuff around, I can't reuse that on another site. It's completely custom to that specific content type on that specific site. But with CTools layouts, I can create the layout, use any kind of markup that I want, HTML5 preferably, semantic. And then with that TPL, then I can just sort of take that layout, move it to a new site and reuse it, which is great. So how do you do that? It's actually pretty easy. You just need to add this to your theme info file, plugins, panels, layouts, and then this is basically the directory within your theme where these layouts are stored. Oops. The things that you need to have in your themes directory then is, so inside our layouts directory, the name of the layout, which is basically like the machine name, for this particular layout. And then a .inc file, and inside that .inc file is some really basic things. It's very similar to .info files. No, the .inc file has some sort of basic, some real basic PHP in there to specify the regions of your layout. And then, of course, you have the TPL file, which actually has the markup. And this then corresponding CSS file. And sort of in this inc file, you specify what the names of your TPL and the name of your CSS is. And then these are some optional things here. You can have a file or an icon that basically shows up next to that layout inside panels. You can have a different TPL and CSS file for the administrative side if you need it. Don't usually need it, but it's one thing you can have optional. So these three are sort of optional. Then just edit all those files, right? I'm not going to go into editing all those files because it'd be extremely boring presentation. I'm hoping that it's not already an extremely boring presentation, but I'm definitely going to skip that. But basically, once you've done that, and I'll have a link here for where you can learn about how to do those things. It's pretty basic, but there's already documentation on Drupal.org. I'll give you the link in a second. So now let's actually configure it. We're going to use Display Suite. It's easier to do some screenshots of Display Suite. So go there and let's see. Where's Display Suite? Layouts, I think, maybe? I don't use it that often.